Almost every day on alternative media, Australians see another shocking headline. A violent crime, another family destroyed, another tragedy that could have been prevented. I didn't even want to make this video, but after the recent tragic event in the US where a young Ukrainian refugee girl was murdered on a bus and it was barely touched by legacy media, then Charlie Kirk speaking out about it.
This was one of the coldest, most senseless murders I've ever seen. She had no interaction with this guy whatsoever. She was sitting minding her own business and he just takes out a knife and just decides to stab her. The attacker did say, "I got that white girl."
And him starting to talk about the Middle Eastern foreign influence in his country, then getting assassinated a few days later. For me, it was unfortunately the last straw, because here in Australia, it's not much different. These stories pile up, often hidden and often ignored. And when you look closely at the details of the ones here in Australia, a common pattern keeps appearing. The offenders weren't even born here. Now, this video isn't about hate or racism. I'm myself a Christian and love and believe all people have equal value to God, but this video is about the truth. It's about love for Australia and about protecting Australians. And to love someone is to tell them the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. That's why we need to talk about Australia's overseas crime problem. So today we're going to look at what's really happening here in Australia, why it's bigger than just a few isolated cases, and what the statistics have to say about all this. To support us, consider becoming a YouTube channel member or Patreon, or check out our merch, links in the description below. Let's start with a case that rocked the nation. On a Sunday morning in mid-June 2025, 62-year-old Dominic Bryan was approached and viciously attacked at a quiet intersection. The alleged culprit, Laminja Friday Yokoju, a 43-year-old man recently released from immigration detention after the infamous High Court's NZYQ ruling. More on that destructive ruling later. Yokoju, who was on a bridging visa and under ankle monitoring, allegedly struck O'Brien and stomped on his head in an alleged unprovoked attack, continuing the assault until Australian Border Force officers coincidentally passed by to check on his bracelet when they intervened. And Dominic O'Brien died in hospital 6 days later. In court, Yokoju reportedly laughed, saying multiple times, "This is a joke to me," which is a quote. Imagine being the family impacted by this. They didn't ask for this, they didn't invite it, yet they're left with the scars that will last a lifetime. And here's the point. This wasn't just a random tragedy. The person responsible had already been flagged, yet here they were, walking the streets of our country. And as if one story wasn't enough, there is another one, which you might remember this one. Imagine a sunny evening at a suburban aquatic center. Families, children, swimmers, a 19-year-old lifeguard doing his job, keeping people safe. Then out of nowhere, a gang of 9 Middle Eastern young men turned on him after he asked them to stop doing dangerous flips near other swimmers and children. And in front of families and kids, they headbutted, kicked, and punched him, leaving him bloodied. His uniform was soaked, and the attackers fled, and he was rushed to hospital, and luckily he survived. 2 separate events, different places, different families, but a similar thread. People who should never have been in the community were released, or people allowed into the country through weak systems. This video isn't about demonizing any one person or group. It's about recognizing patterns. Because if we pretend these cases are isolated, we'll never fix the system that allows them to happen again and again. The reality is these types of crimes, along with sexual assaults and others and more by overseas people, are happening very regularly, but aren't being reported on much by mainstream media. But thanks to alternative media and news sites like Notice and News, we can actually see what's happening regularly in our country. And side note, Notice the News is apparently run by some hippie from Tassie who is a subcontractor and is likely being contracted by someone with some sort of affiliation to the NSN. But regardless of what you think about them or about that, Notice the News is still actually reporting on the news in our country that the mainstream media won't. Back in the 1960s and 70s, before mass immigration, Australia was very different. We were more homogenous, built on Christian foundations, and crime rates reflected that stability. The numbers per 100,000 people looked like this. The murders were about 1, sexual assaults around 20 per 100,000, and general assaults around 150 per 100,000. Compare that to today in Australia, and murders are about 3, so 3 times the amount. Sexual assaults about 100 and assaults close to 300. So that's a huge increase in all those areas. And as I'm about to show through the stats, if we come to reality, that violence has risen. And part of what's contributed to that is because we are importing problems from other parts of the world. Don't believe that's true? Well, yeah, like I said, let's look at this data from the regions where many of our migrants come from. Here's what the numbers look like. So murders are approximately 3 per 100,000 in Middle Eastern Muslim majority countries. South Asia, so India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, etc., is 4. Sub-Saharan Africa is 14. And the third world overall as a whole on average is also 13. Now for sexual assaults, Middle Eastern Muslim majority countries, 1,300. In South Asia, approximately 300. Sub-Saharan Africa, approximately 2,000. And the third world overall, approximately 1,800. And general assaults, approximately 2,000 Middle Eastern Muslim countries, South Asia 2,500, Sub-Saharan Africa approximately 5,000, and the third world overall approximately 2,000. Now compare those with the figures from Australia back in the 60s and 70s. The contrast is shocking. When you bring a large number of people from places with violence rates 10, 20, even 30 times higher than our own historic baseline, you can't expect those averages not to influence, at least slightly, what's happening here. Now, this doesn't mean that every overseas person is a criminal or is violent. Of course not. Right? Most come here because it's better here and they want to build a better life. And some of them succeed in doing that for them and their families. But averages matter. Statistics matter. And they eventually shape societies. Leave a like if you agree. And if crime stats weren't worrying enough, let's talk about ridiculous recent policy. In 2023, the High Court handed down what's known as the NZYQ decision. And under our laws, we can't legally deport criminals back to their home country, even if they commit serious crimes, if they're an asylum seeker, because apparently it's inhumane if their country is too dangerous. So we used to have a system where we could place these so-called asylum seekers who commit violent crimes in indefinite detention so that the community is safe from these criminals as we couldn't deport them. However, with the NZYQ decision by the High Court, this was changed and also considered inhumane, apparently. So overnight, in 2023, hundreds of third world detainees with violent criminal records were released. Right, this was in 2023, and only just recently, as of late, like the last month, has the government decided to try and do something about this in the face of a lot of backlash, as they recently have just signed a $2.5 billion deal with Nauru. The idea has been reported as this: to resettle these released detainees offshore so they wouldn't be walking our streets. Sounds like a very late fix, and already a lot of these violent detainees have committed more crime and harmed the community a lot in the last few years. But the deal seems good on the surface, and I hope it pans out well and turns out well. But here's the truth on it, is that firstly, only 3 people have actually been sent there so far. And secondly, Nauru itself actually has final discretion. So apparently they actually don't have to accept anyone that they don't want to, like they can have the final word. And that means that the hundreds released already in 2023 that are out in our community, it means that there's no 100% guarantee that they'll actually leave Australia, even though that is the current claim that they say of what they want to do. So the law that released them still stands, and the Nauru plan is barely functioning yet, and Australians are the ones left exposed. Now I'm going to share a small story that gives insight into why culture matters. My friend's mum told me not too long ago that she asked an Indian work colleague of hers why he didn't really seem to care too much about other people's struggles. And his answer was, quote, "If you've got a massive bowl of rice and 1 grain falls out, you don't really care. That's how we think in India," end quote. And when she said that, it reminded me of the recent case in the US where 2 Indian truck drivers killed an American family in a crash and afterwards looked pretty unfazed and showed little remorse. Now, I understand that maybe not all Indians do think this way, but it highlighted that attitudes towards life, safety, and accountability do vary in different cultures, and those attitudes don't always change when someone moves to a new country. Now, remember what Australia used to be. In the 60s, 70s, before then, our streets were safer, families walked at night without fear, neighbors trusted each other, churches were fuller, communities stronger. Crime wasn't non-existent, but the rates were a fraction of what we see today. And while reporting has improved, the lived experience and reality was much different. People felt safer because in many ways they were. And now today, after decades of policy changes, cultural shifts, and mass migration from high crime regions, our stats are climbing. And so is the feeling that something has gone very wrong in our country. This is where I want to be very clear. Talking about this is not hate, it's not racism. I'm a Christian and I love people of every background. But love also means protection. Love means standing up for your family. Love means defending your community and country. If we ignore the truth, we aren't loving, we're abandoning. And that's why I made this video, to put the facts in front of you, to connect the dots that most media won't, and to ask the questions that desperately need asking. So what now? Australians need to wake up. We as the Australian people need to recognize that yes, all people have equal value, but not all cultures are equal, and that this multicultural experiment isn't going very well here. We need leaders willing to put the safety of Australians first. We need immigration policies based on reality, not on political correctness, with thorough background checks as well on anyone who comes in. When crime rates in source countries are this high, we have to recognize that as a risk for our own people. When courts release dangerous offenders into our streets, we have to push back. Talking about this isn't hate or racism, it's actually love. It's love for Australia, love for its people, and love for the truth. And if you agree, like and share this video. The more Australians that know what's happening makes it harder for politicians to ignore this. And also consider checking out our merch, becoming a YouTube channel member or Patreon, links in the description, and check out one of the videos on screen now. God bless Australia, and Christ is King.